Right.
Everybody ready? Okay. I call to order the November 28th, 2016 regular business meeting of City Council. Mr. Hamp, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll remind those in attendance, if you wish to speak tonight during the public hearing or the citizens' comment period, there are sign-up sheets in the back of the room. Before we get started, I see we have some special guests in the back of the room. If somebody from the troupe would like to come up and introduce who we have here tonight, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Tom Slowoski. I'm Scoutmaster Troop 25 here in Waynesboro, and the boys here tonight are fulfilling a requirement for citizenship in the community, and they're here just to see what goes on at a city council meeting. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you, and welcome to City Council tonight. Item 2 is the consideration of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor of adopting the consent agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 4-0. Item 3 is matters from council members. Does anybody have anything to present tonight?
Just say this afternoon I was able to spend a little time with the leadership program at Waynesboro High School, and about an hour and a half of discussion about civics and community leadership in Waynesboro, and so it was awesome to have that program in Waynesboro, and great participation from the students too. With regards to the Waynesboro High School, kind of brief talk to Mr. Hamp a little bit about it today, and I think we're looking to potentially have a either subcommittee meeting here shortly or a full-on group work session together with 2 of the bodies. And so, but things are progressing on our side, and as is on the school board side. That's all I have.
Anyone else?
Next Monday will be the first Monday in December, so I'll be at the Panera Bread from 8 to 9. If anyone has any issues they'd like to talk about, I'll be at the library the same night, 7 to 8. So come on out and let's talk.
I had an opportunity to attend the community block party put together by Veronica Davis, and we had a lot of city departments represented there, and I thought it was really nice. And we hope to have it again next year. So.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on. Item 4 is to hold a public hearing and consider introducing an ordinance establishing a food truck license in the amount of $150 per annum, beginning on January the 1st of each year by amending Chapter 22, Businesses, Article 2, License, Division 3, Special Licenses of the Code of the City of Waynesboro. Mr. Hamp?
Yes, sir. So in October, as a refresher, the council directed staff to review and bring forward a recommendation concerning the licensing of food trucks under Chapter 2 of the City Code. At that time, in October, the council expressed particular interest in reducing the license fee for food truck operators. As a reminder, these licenses are issued by localities in the Commonwealth under the parameter or authority of the state code, which sets a maximum fee of $500 per annum. And presently, the City of Waynesboro's itinerant vendor fee, where food trucks are concerned, is $500 per annum. Following additional conversation and direction provided by City Council, the staff prepared an ordinance for your consideration this evening that sets the fee at $150 per year. The council is required to have a public hearing on the matter. Following the public hearing, the council is asked to introduce an ordinance revising that license fee for food trucks. Again, the advertisement for the public hearing identified $150. Council can pursue that amount or a lower amount by simply either introducing the ordinance at a lower rate or formally amending the ordinance prior to adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Hamp.
That's all I have.
All right, is there any other questions for Mr. Hamp? If not, I'll hereby open the public hearing.
No one has signed up to speak, sir.
Actually, I did sign up. Oh, probably a sheet. I must have.
Bart, you want to come up to the,
What did I sign up?
if you'll give us your name and your address, please.
Yes, Bart Landman, 900 Oak Avenue. Just a quick statement in listening to the conversation about the food trucks in relations to full-time food trucks in Waynesboro, and then also it kind of moved into an event scenario. And we were talking about there being $150 that would sort of fit all of that circumstance. There's a third thing that I wanted to introduce as a business owner, and that is, so one is, maybe there's three parts to this. One would be the event, one would be the full-time food truck. The way that food trucks work around vicinities is they oftentimes rotate into different counties and different locales. It's a very contemporary cultural experience to have food trucks rotate into breweries, which I happen to be a brewery owner. So what we're seeing is no food trucks are really coming by the brewery because of the $500. I realize we're talking about knocking it down to $150. But they have to pay these in each locale. So, $30 here, $50 here. I think the highest one we saw was $100, Charlottesville, prorated. So maybe in considering this, we should consider, or maybe I'm asking you to consider a potential to have, three tiers. I realize that policing might be an issue, but one, for an event, they pay for a fee to get into that event. Two, if they're full-time, we're going to see them around town and know that they're full-time because it's a small town. Three, if they're popping in every once in a while, you'll start seeing them. And what I'm looking to do is to have multiple food trucks pop into the brewery and rotate in and out. It's part of our culture as a brewery, and it is also a great opportunity to pull in what tourists into Waynesboro, what they're expecting to have at a brewery, which they have in Northern Virginia, and they have in Richmond, and they have in Harrisonburg. They go, sit down, drink beer, and then want something to eat while they're at the brewery, and that's how food trucks are happening. Sometimes the breweries will have 3 or 4 food trucks at a time. So I guess I'm just kind of putting it out there. I don't have a solution. I know it's complicated if there's 3 levels, but I thought maybe if that I presented something that showed that there's actually a different sort of scenario that is out there, that is a food truck coming into town once, every couple of months in a rotation. It's still exorbitant at $150 to ask that food truck to pay $150. You might have multiple food trucks coming in paying $50, $50, $50, so it might, work out in the end. And with 1 minute left, I'm going to say that we are the brick and mortar that is paying for utilities, that's paying our taxes and that type of thing. These people are coming in, we plug their food truck into the building, so they're using our electric. All of their clientele is actually using our bathrooms. So, I realize that there's a conversation about food trucks and brick and mortar. I think that's more the ones that are coming in, parking in town, for a full-time food truck than it is the rotation in food truck that would be associated with the brewery. So that's what I have to say, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
No one else, correct, Mr. Hamp?
That's correct.
All right, I'll hereby close the public hearing. Are there any additional questions or comments from council?
I think I would ask as an alternate to the $150 fee is for council to consider a $100 fee. And where I'm at with that is that I think there's certainly a case to be made for the $37.50 or the $50, but it is complicated in that you have to have those. I mean, I think as Mr. Lehman mentioned, 3 different tiers. So we can either take 6 months to figure out how to fix that, or make a decision now, get something in place that I think is much more reasonable, is conducive to attracting those sorts of businesses in town, at the same time as I would ask that that staff examine an alternate structure for consideration, maybe this time next year. But more specifically, is examine the creation of a food truck regulations, so that we, there's many communities across Virginia articulate where food trucks are permitted and where they're not permitted, and so on. And that could actually be the beginning for a tiered system, I think, as you mentioned. But I certainly don't think that we should sit around and keep holding on to the $500 fee and while we figure it out. And so that's, I'd ask that in way of a motion that we approve and introduce the ordinance at a $100 per annum beginning January 1st of each year.
All right, thank you. Mr. Short, any other comments?
No.
All right, Mr. Hamp, be clear, since he introduced it at 100, do we have to do an amended, or we just go in with the full 100?
We can go with the full 100.
All right, so there's a motion to, for a $100 fee per annum. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Is there any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 4-0. This and other ordinance introduced this evening will be considered at the December 12th regular business meeting. Item 5A is to receive a presentation from James Bradley, Fire Chief, providing an overview of the departmental operations and previewing fiscal year 2018 budget presentation. Chief Bradley.
Mayor, members of council, city staff, present the Waynesboro Fire Department. Snapshot. Used to be years back, we just did fire suppression. Now we've added emergency medical services, technical rescue, which is confined space, high angle rescue, trench rescue, hazard materials mitigation, and all these were very specialized fields. For our prevention, we do that through our public education. We do child safety seats. We do a second grade educational program now. 20-some years ago, we started with a 5th grade program, and with changes in education and the way the school systems are set up, it's moved down to the 2nd grade. We do fire extinguisher training for any of the corporations or civilians that would like training. We have a free smoke detector program. If people call in, residents need a smoke detector, we'll go out and install it for them. And while we're there, we'll do a fire inspection for them at their house to make them safe as possible. For our additional prevention, we have a juvenile fire setter program that requires additional training for personnel in. Additional prevention programs or fire and life safety inspections. We do all commercial properties and multifamily dwellings. We administer code permits. We do plans review with the sites needed for water or size of structure, any additional needs for the development. For insurance services office and for our safety of our city, we also do a hydrant maintenance program to make sure our hydrants flow efficiently and they actually work. We do a Knox box program, which allows us to access into buildings. And pre-incident planning is drawings of commercial properties and other structures, site plans, that shows us the layout of the internal layout of a building. For structure fires, we do the origin and cause of fires. This is our current layout now of the organizational chart. Fire chief, deputy chief, administrative assistant, 3 shifts of 10, and a deputy fire marshal. In 2015, over 2,000 calls. As you notice, the fires were small. Most of it is emergency medical. Hazard conditions are either natural gas leaks, car wrecks. Then there's other calls for service and false alarms. As you see, from 13 to 15, our calls have increased about 100 a year. Property loss versus what we actually saved, we lost about 640,000 in 15, but we saved almost 5 million. This is probably a recurrent theme with other departments. Our retention is a tremendous concern for us. We've had a very small percentage retire. The 82% that left for other reasons, most of those were other employments outside of our jurisdiction. Since 2010, we've lost 28 employees. That's almost 100% of the department. There's additional monies that's required every time that you have to continually, it's a continual training effort, much the police department goes through. Some of our challenges is a service delivery. That's our current shift, the captain, 3 lieutenants, 6 firefighters. At full manning, as you see, we've got 2 engines with 3, the ladder or tower with 3, and a command officer. At our minimum manning, we allow 2 off for vacation or sick. As compared to a NFPA, National Fire Protection Association standard 1710, which recommends 4 across the board, and ISO, which is insurance services, requires 6. We're shooting more towards the 1710, but there is some, in the way they calculate is why there's a difference between the 4 and 6. 1710 would ease closer to the 6 for highly industrialized areas where the 4 is based on a single family response. 1710 is the standard for organization deployment of the fire suppression operations, emergency medical operations, and special operations to public by the fire department. The standard states we should have a full assignment consisting of 17 personnel, which is 3 engines, a truck, and a command vehicle needed on the scene within 8 minutes of a call. We're not able to meet that with our current staffing of 10 and, as explained earlier, with the minimum staffing of 8. We're only able to staff the 2 engine companies versus the 3 that's needed to respond. And that's not only for our safety, but the citizen safety as well. Upcoming budget drivers for fleet, our ladder trucks of 1990. Industry standards, NFPA 1911, which pertains to motorized fire apparatus. Anything over 25 years old should be replaced or moved to a reserve apparatus. Since July of 15, we spent almost $45,000 in maintenance and repairs to our current ladder. It has exceeded its life. As far as our facilities, station was built in '58. It's not really, it wasn't designed for our current staffing and our operations. The AC units are in need of replacement. They're 15 plus years old. One that was just pointed out earlier, with the building almost 60 years old, the boiler is also almost 60 years old, and I'm not sure how much more life it's got in it. For staffing, in the upcoming budget, I will pursue additional recruitment and retention strategies, trying to increase staffing as well to bring our staffing to 4 per piece. for the current 3 that we do run, but it also gives the flexibility to put the 3rd engine in service. So that gives us some flexibility on our needs, and that is a snapshot of the fire department. Any questions from council?
Chief, when you look at surrounding departments, do they face some of the same issues you have as far as the number of people and the turnover?
Yes. In the close proximity to the county and the city of Stanton, yes.
Is there a reason, I mean, are people trying to go to just bigger departments where there's more chance for advancement, or is it, I know years in past, you'd get a person here and it seemed like they'd come to work either at the police department or the fire department, they'd stay there until they retired. And what's the difference now?
Societal changes in people themselves. They're always looking to whether they want to try to get to somewhere where they can rapidly go up the chain of command, or increases in most of ours have left for salary reasons. And that's going to, part of the recruitment is to increase our salaries as well, to try to keep what we got and to draw others in. We're having a very difficult time, much like Chief Wilhelm has, in drawing new candidates in to even make an application to be a fireman. And that is also being experienced in other jurisdictions as well.
Any other questions?
A long time ago, and I forget who I spoke to. I think they were over at some of the staff were over at a Kate Collins event a few months back, and we just got into a grand conversation about volunteer firefighters, and that at one point in our city's history, that was a significant makeup of our fire response team, as I understand it. And so,
yes, that is correct.
And whereas, what's the balance of your volunteer versus our paid staff now?
Predominantly paid. We've got about 8 active volunteers. And
eight active volunteers.
Years back, there was probably close to 30.
Wow.
But due to demographic, societal changes, even the volunteer departments are having difficulties drawing volunteers in.
Right. One of the things that there was a local business owner who reached out to me during the was the first council about the cost of the equipment for the volunteers. And so, as I understand it, the volunteers are required to purchase their own equipment.
No, sir. City furnishes all.
Okay,
equipment.
so that's good information. But it's a fairly significant cost.
Yes, it's about $2,000 just for the pants and coat and helmet that they wear.
Okay, great.
Does some of the problems in having volunteers, I know in the olden days, the training wasn't as intense as it is today. I know with the police department, the training that their reserves have to go through. And I assume it's the same way with the fire department. Is that probably a reason that you don't get the interest for volunteers because of the amount of training and time that it takes?
The amount of training, yes, exactly. The amount of training that's required and the time that it takes, and it's also hurting the medical side as well for the rescue squad. The requirements for volunteer to work, manage their family, and try to get the classes is extremely difficult in today's society. So that enhances the downturn of all volunteers.
I can understand that. Any other questions? Chief, thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Item 5B is to receive a presentation from Gary Kratzer, Emergency Operations Director, providing an overall view of the department and operations and previewing fiscal year 2018 budget presentation.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to come speak with you this evening about our department. where we are operationally and some of the challenges we face and what our primary focus is going to be in the upcoming budget. So thank you for that opportunity. All right, so the Department of Emergency Management actually provides multiple functions. We're divided into 4 different divisions. The first and foremost that most people think about is the Emergency Communications Center, sometimes referred to as EOC. We also perform emergency management responsibilities, which is disaster planning, coordination, response. We provide the coordination under Chapter 28 of the Code of the City for emergency medical services. And we also provide for the entire organization the coordination of health and safety, making sure that we're compliant with OSHA standards, safety training, et cetera. So we'll talk about each division briefly. The Emergency Communications Center, the dispatchers receive, dispatch, provide pre-arrival instructions, coordinate response to all E911 calls for service, for police, fire, and EMS. And we also provide after-hours response for our Public Works Operations Division. So after normal business hours are closed, if someone calls in with a water main break or there's any other type of public works emergency, the call gets routed to us, and then we contact the appropriate folks to handle that situation. Our Emergency Operations Center is an accredited Emergency Medical Dispatch Public Safety Answering Point, or PSAP, which is something we take great pride in. We've been doing what we call priority dispatching since we were organized in 1990. The purpose behind that is to allow us to have the most efficient utilization of the resources we have in our jurisdiction, whether that's police, fire, EMS, all those resources are coordinated through our priority dispatch system. For example, we often get asked, why do we see so much apparatus go to certain calls? For example, in a cardiac arrest situation, when we get a report that there's a possibility that someone's heart has stopped beating, immediately the dispatcher on the phone is delivering what we call pre-arrival instructions to the caller, telling them how to do, walking them step by step through starting CPR. The next step is dispatching the appropriate apparatus. Fortunately, in Waynesboro, our police department, since 1997, has been carrying automatic external defibrillators in their police cars. We send a police car, we send a fire truck with at least an EMT, sometimes with a paramedic on board, and we send a medic ambulance from the rescue squad, all converging on that incident scene as quickly as they can. The hallmark of that program is we've been able to demonstrate in the last couple of years several opportunities where before fire and EMS ever arrived, our police officers had successfully restarted someone's heart. Or even prior to that, our dispatchers had gotten a heartbeat back. So there's effectiveness in that system. We use an enhanced 911 call processing system, which was recently upgraded about a year ago through grant funds through the Virginia Wireless 911 Board. That system allows us to receive what we call Phase 2 wireless. Most folks today have abandoned their home phones and carry a cell phone at home as their primary means of communication. With Phase 2 wireless, that allows the 911 dispatcher on a map to have a visual reference and latitude, longitude of where that handset is. So if you're not able to speak with us, we can get within about 60 to 100 feet of your location as long as your handset is functioning properly. And again, we've utilized a priority dispatch system for EMS since 1990. That's one of our hallmarks of our operation. Some of our statistics for 2015, we managed in 2015 107,000 total telephone interactions. 15,000, about 15.5 of those, 15.6 were emergency 911 calls. About 76,000 were non-emergent or administrative calls, but sometimes those calls are still for incidents that require dispatch of one of our public safety resources. For example, it may be a non-emergent call for the animal control officer, or it may be related to a parking complaint, or it may be related to follow-up of a crime that the police department's already investigating. It might be for questions about a controlled burn or some fire situation that the fire department needs to get involved in. About 15,500 of those calls was related to our dispatchers having to call outbound to interact with another jurisdiction, with another agency, calling for wreckers, all those kind of things that they do on a daily basis. We dispatched 31,623 incidents. 24,269 of those were for law enforcement. 227 were for EMS or the rescue squad. 2,024 were fire-related. A significant number of those, as Chief Bradley alluded to, are related to EMS. A large percentage of what the fire department does, which is traditional in the fire service anywhere you go today, is they provide a heavy resource to our emergency medical services response. And we interacted with after-hours public works incidents in about 107. Our staffing, currently we have 13 full-time staff, which includes myself, 3 supervisors, and 9 full-time telecommunicators. We have 7 part-time telecommunicators that provide relief, help cover holidays, nights, weekends, times when I have full-time staff away at training. We have an unfunded office administrator position that has not been funded since the financial crisis in 2008 that we're going to be seeking to restore. And we are looking to promote a supervisor of that process in the not too distant future. Currently, some of the challenges, just like Chief Bradley, and I think you've heard previously from Chief Wilhelm, in public safety, recruitment, and retention are big buzzwords that we hear a lot about today. Some of the things impacting recruitment and retention: salary, being competitive in the market. It's a stressful job. Long hours, nights, weekends, holidays. Dispatchers work 12-hour shifts, 7 in the morning till 7 at night, or 7 at night until 7 in the morning. We're seeing lower and lower number of applicants in our applicant pool. We used to get anywhere from 25 to 30, maybe 40 applicants for a position. We're lucky if we get 15 to 20 for an open position currently. Once we've weeded through those, we found that we may be able to get 1 out of 3 that can successfully complete a background investigation process. Training is lengthy. It takes, unless you get somebody that comes to you with prior experience and the necessary certifications, it takes about 9 to 12 months to train a dispatcher. And to get them up to speed and fully released and on their own and completely certified. And one thing that I wanted to note, that some recent studies have come out looking at the overall public safety spectrum, and everybody hears a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder, and they're now identifying that in the communications officer, that's a big issue. It's a big issue because unlike our counterparts in fire and EMS and law enforcement, these folks are in a room for 12 hours. And they go from one situation directly to another with minimal downtime. And over time, that takes a toll on those doing that job. You can look at some of our success. We've been very fortunate in our longevity. We've got some folks that have been with us since we opened in 1990. One of our long-term employees happens to be with me tonight. Ronnie's been with us for 25 years. So we're very fortunate to have some of that, but we're seeing more and more of that through attrition is fading away. Not many people make a career of public safety communications. For our budget priorities for the communications division, we've conducted a regional market assessment, been working with our human resources department, and we're going to be requesting funding to support a market adjustment for the communications officers. Looking for funding to fund a vacant administrative position. And we also are in need, our radio site at the landfill, which supports public works, public safety, and all facets, police, fire, and EMS, has been there since 1990. The communications building that was put on that site, which houses our repeaters and all the necessary equipment to make that system function, has been there since 1990. The building it was put in was a used building. It's wear, it's showing a lot of age. We can't get specific parts for it anymore, and some of that equipment needs to be replaced. So we're going to be requesting funding from council to replace that equipment to support our entire public safety infrastructure, not just the 911 system. Emergency management, we're responsible for planning, coordination, and direction in an all hazards environment. It used to be that emergency management focused, for example, in the Cold War era, they focused on nuclear emergencies and nuclear issues. Today, we talk about an all hazards approach. Whether it's terrorism, it's natural disasters, it's man-made type situations, it's planning for all hazards. We look at 4 phases: preparation, response, recovery, and mitigation. Through our program, we've had several very successful mitigation efforts related to flooding. We purchased 15 homes in the floodplain using FEMA hazard mitigation grant funds back in the late 90s, removing them from harm's way, minimizing repetitive losses, saving homeowners and insurance premiums, and actually what we believe is lowering impact of future flood events. So that was a big success of that program. We review and approve emergency plans for all licensed nursing and assisted living facilities as required by state code. We work with the different departments in the city for Department of Homeland Security grants, the Local Emergency Management Program grant, and for other local funding. And we also coordinate a lot with our local, regional, state, federal, and private sector partners as we plan for, exercise, and prepare for any type of all-hazard emergency that would require the locality to declare a local emergency. EMS, we're responsible under Chapter 28 for emergency medical services. We coordinate the EMS system, working with the fire department, working with our rescue squad, which is an independent nonprofit organization in the city. It's a career volunteer agency that's went through much of what Chief Bradley talked about with the fire service. Used to be an all-volunteer rescue squad. They just celebrated their 65th anniversary. And slowly, because of fundraising, the amount of training that's required, and all the things that impact volunteers today, when they started revenue recovery, they began billing health insurances for service. They also started hiring career providers to provide service. The organization has made a transition from a volunteer organization to a volunteer organization supported by career to a career organization supported by volunteers. They're still very viable. They provide high-level quality emergency medical services, again, in conjunction with our fire department. We assist with training and continuing education. Our department represents the city at regional and state levels. Again, our primary transport agency is the nonprofit Waynesboro First Aid Crew, with our secondary agency being the Waynesboro Fire Department. We provide emergency medical technician to paramedic advanced life support. Again, we bill for services, revenue recovery. They bill insurance. They balance bill to the patient as required by Medicare. We have about a 30 to 35% non-pay rate and non-recovery rate. Some of the challenges are recruitment and retention, much like Chief Bradley talked about. There's also some challenges coming with funding. The Centers for Medicaid Services are looking to move to performance-based billing, much like the rest of the healthcare industry has done. Revenue recovery provides about 65 to 70% of their budget. Anything that challenges that ability to get that revenue recovery can impact their ability to deliver service. A new ambulance, for example, under the new ambulance standards today, costs about $220,000. Durable medical equipment, a cardiac monitor for one ambulance is about $35,000. Increasing demand for services, longer life, aging population, increased calls for service. Another buzzword you'll hear is mobile integrated healthcare, and that's taking and helping to prevent readmissions to hospitals, lowering the cost for hospitals, working with our EMS system. We're going to need to consider in the not too distant future changes to the city code to allow increased flexibility in billing various insurances to ensure that they're getting the revenue they need to continue having the wheels turn on those trucks. Health and safety, we manage the city's workers' compensation program. All claims are managed through my office. We manage pre-employment and annual physical exam program for public safety. and we provide health and safety training to all city departments. We also manage the Line of Duty Act, or the LOTA program, for all of our public safety departments, and we ensure compliance with federal and state OSHA requirements and regulations. Are there any questions?
I have one question. Seems like I remember in years past, we talked about what would happen if a system went down and the backup that you have.
Our system, we do have redundancy in several different ways. We have the ability, for example, we have a backup generator for the system. We have the ability to bring in a towable generator to continue if our backup generator were to fail. But we also have cooperative agreements with our neighbors, with Augusta County, for example, where it's a very cost-effective solution. We can reroute our 911 calls to them. We can then send our staff up there, and they can dispatch from that locality. We have used that on occasion, mainly during times when we had equipment upgrades going on and you needed to shift those calls temporarily. It also tests the system to ensure that it works. And our partners in Stanton and Augusta also have that same ability where they can transfer amongst themselves. That's one of the hallmarks of our system, is that we have that redundancy built in, whereas in some of the larger systems where you have one, you have to find a way to either maintain a separate standalone system, or you have to provide backup in some other manner. So that's one of the big hallmarks of our system.
We used to not have it, correct?
It's probably the first 5 years, no, but after that we added that feature in. Other questions? We certainly invite council to come over and see how our tax dollars are being spent. We'd welcome you at any time that you want to come by for a visit.
I'd say I am very interested in the insurance, recouping insurance for the calls that you all. And so I would just ask that we develop an ordinance in earnest to address that. That sounds like a good opportunity, a missed opportunity actually that we're having right now in terms of revenue, offsetting some of the revenue costs.
And they are billing now, but we need to modernize that ordinance a little bit, bring it up to current standards, and I think that will help them recoup additional revenues from the health insurance industry.
Great.
So we will work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Item 5C is to receive a presentation from the city manager regarding adjustments to city pay scales. Mr. Hamp.
Mayor Allen and members of council, as a precursor, I think that for tonight, I will deliver the information, and it's my understanding that council will consider acting on the information at its December 12th meeting. But so you know, the city compensates our employees through an established system of position profiles, position classification, and pay grades to which the various position profiles are assigned. It's a pay and classification system. These grades or pay grades consist of a minimum or an entry, a midpoint, and a maximum compensation rate. The current pay grades were established in 2008 following a pay and classification study, a comprehensive pay and classification study, and have not been adjusted since that time. Pay grades or scales should be adjusted periodically to reflect increases in cost of living or inflation, and for broader market forces of compensation to make sure that you're compensating similar or equivalent positions in a manner that makes them or positions them in a competitive manner to allow the organization to recruit and retain qualified people or employees. Properly adjusted pay grades and scales are an important element of a multifaceted solution for improving recruitment and retention of well-qualified employees. As I mentioned before, these particular grades have not been adjusted since 2008, and in that time, the city has furnished 3 market-based adjustments, 4 if you count the one that is scheduled for this January. And in addition, excuse me, in 2012, in a measure that the city was obligated to come into compliance with new VRS regulations, compensation for employees was increased by 5.2% to offset a new requirement that what were originally referred to or known as Plan 1 employees contribute to their retirement. And at that point, there probably should have been some consideration given to increasing or adjusting the pay grades to recognize that. So over a period of about 9 years, we've had some forces that are related to inflation and some forces that are related to the administration of our retirement system that prompt me as the city manager to bring city council's attention to what I believe is a need to adjust and probably need to adjust the entry level pay. Tonight, I'm simply asking the council to adjust the maximum level pay to allow employees to enjoy, or first to recognize the upward pressure on pay scales through inflation and pay administration or retirement administration, but also to recognize that the cost of living over that nearly decade-long period has increased as well, particularly with respect to health care costs for employees. My recommendation would be that the council consider adjusting the maximum pay by 10.5 to 15.5%. There would not be a budgetary implication for that in the current fiscal year. The bigger question becomes when the time arrives to adjust entry-level pay, there will likely be, there will most certainly be budget implications in order to bring existing employees to identified new minimum pay levels, and also to address in some manner the force of compression that inevitably occurs when you do that for employees who are already in the organization. So again, my interest this evening is to inform and alert council to what I believe is a need to increase the maximum pay grade or maximum pay levels in each grade, and again forecast the need that some examination of the entry point on those pay grades needs also to be adjusted in the future. I'll be happy to respond to any questions that you have.
Is there a reason why we couldn't look at both the minimum rates and the maximum rates at the same time?
To increase the minimum rates would require likely require an increase to pay for existing employees, and that is not factored into the current budget year. I think we would want to wait and do that in conjunction with the adoption of a new budget.
Any other questions?
I guess I'd appreciate just some additional information as to how you arrive at the 10.5% rate, and I understand that you in the notes of reflecting inflationary factors in consumer price index. So I guess if you could show
Sure.
in a graphical form of to justify that 10.5%.
Sure.
Anything else? Great, thank you, Mr. Hamp.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Item 6A is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating the Economic Development Committed Reserves in the amount of $30,683 and a portion of the Governmental Facilities Reserves in the amount of $19,317 to the general fund to provide additional funding to update the city's comprehensive plan. Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the comprehensive plan is a document that's designed to guide the future development of a city. It is supposed to provide a firm foundation for policy and action and to promote a more certain future. It takes into account issues as diverse as land use, both existing and future, changing demographics of the community, housing, public infrastructure, education, recreational facilities, and transportation facilities. In essence, the comprehensive plan is supposed to allow us to imagine a future for ourselves, a preferred future, and then to tell us whether we're on track to attain that future, and if we're not, to give us guidance on how to either stay on track or to get on track. Ultimately, the plan is useful to developers, investors, and residents because it provides some advanced knowledge of the intention of the city. And I can tell you my own experience in working with the development community. It comes up anytime developers are looking at rezonings and site plans. They will ask, what's the vision of the city here? What does the city want to see here? The Code of Virginia requires localities to adopt a comprehensive plan and to review the plan every 5 years. The city last adopted a complete plan in 1998. We did revise the land use portion of the comprehensive plan in 2008. The Code of Virginia also requires, and some agencies less formally require, that certain improvements must be identified in the comprehensive plan in order to receive funding. For instance, the applications we've made in recent years for funding for the Southern Corridor or Tiffany Drive extension were required to be in the comprehensive plan to be eligible to be in VDOT's 6-year improvement plan. It's one of the boxes that has to be checked in that application. The City Council appropriated $50,000 in the current fiscal year to develop a comprehensive plan for Waynesboro. We have solicited proposals from qualified firms, and we don't feel as if the budget will be sufficient to secure a preferred vendor. And so tonight we're asking that the City Council increase the budget by $50,000 through the use of the identified committed reserves as noted by the mayor. You know, I've worked on the 1998 plan. I worked on the 2008 update to the land use guide. Prior to coming to the city, I'd crafted comprehensive plans for other localities. And I look at where we are in the community, all the many things that face us. You're hearing about them through staff. You know about them because they come to you through your constituents, the demands on the city. And so I think we're really at an opportune time to go through this process. Having interviewed the potential vendors, I'm part of the review committee, I think we have an opportunity to do something exciting and meaningful, and I would ask that you give due consideration to the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Are there any questions, comments?
I just, kind of echo what Mr. Shaw stated. In a former life, authored comprehensive plans for localities. I feel even with that $100,000 appropriation, we're getting a good value on what you would typically see. Typically, comp plans and consulting would be $20,000 to $50,000 more than this. So again, I think it's appreciate staff's work and working with the vendors to identify, I think, a reasonable amount. You got to look at this too. It's a over $40 million budget every single year. Grows every single year with new revenue. $100,000 to talk about our future, what 5 years, 10 years, 20 years looks like. Seems like a pretty wise investment when you consider the amount of funds that we expend as a community. And so I'm excited about it. I think will be a great opportunity to engage people, get the Boy Scouts out for more meetings, and bring their friends and their parents. I think it'd be a really exciting time. So I'm definitely supportive.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Any other comments? If not, is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Item 6B is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating a Perkins Career and Technical Grant in the amount of $2,131 to the school funds for the purchase of small equipment items and software for CTE equipment at K. Collins Middle School and Waynesboro High School. Mr. Ham.
These are all grant funds.
Are there any questions from members of council? If not, is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Item 7 is communications and correspondence.
Mr. Shaw is going to start us with some information on the Florence Avenue Bridge, and then I have 2 items.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think you're well aware that the Florence Avenue Bridge has been closed for a couple of weeks now. And as we discussed at the last council meeting, that essentially one of our streets employees noticed that there was a hole in the pavement. As they looked down through the hole, there was a void in the concrete beam below. The beam was holding water, and they could see the rebar, but not concrete. So we had consulting engineers with Sorts Associates who are on retainer with the city come and do some evaluation. They recommended that we close the bridge and that the bridge remain closed until they could do further investigation. Essentially, the challenge that you have is the bridge is constructed with concrete beams that are hollow. And so what has happened is the top portion of that beam that is hidden by asphalt is eroding. So in order to know the full extent of the problem and even be able to know whether we could keep it open for pedestrian traffic, they would need to peel away sufficient amount of concrete, sufficient amount of asphalt to inspect more concrete. So at that point, they could determine that there would be a repair that could be made, but we're sure that that repair would be north of $100,000. But I think it's worth at least doing an inspection and then determining whether or not we want to discuss a bigger repair or simply put the bridge in a condition to allow pedestrian traffic. Our recommendation to the council would be that considering the condition of the bridge, considering that it's recommended that we replace this bridge, and that regardless of what they find with the problem with the top structure of the beam, that the other problems with the bridge are still going to require its replacement. That is probably not money well spent to do a larger six-figure repair that would still take a couple of months. So, you know, our hope would be that we're successful in our application in the VDOT revenue sharing program, that we would go ahead and initiate design engineering for replacement of the bridge so that by summertime, when the Commonwealth Transportation Board decides on our application, then we would be ready to put the project out to bid. And if all things were favorable, then we might be able to start reconstruction of the bridge sometime next fall. And, you know, as I say, I think our alternative is, at any case, we've got to do a little more investigation, but it just doesn't seem that it makes a lot of sense to spend $100,000 to buy less than a year life out of this particular bridge because of its overall condition. We're certainly here to try to respond to questions or take direction from council, but again, our recommendation is to evaluate the bridge to see if it could be kept open for pedestrian traffic and to proceed with design engineering for the structure itself.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Any comments? All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Ham?
Mayor Allen, recently I was informed that a group of Waynesboro Fire Department career personnel voluntarily lent substantial support to a local food drive which supplied Thanksgiving meals to area families in need. Eligibility and need for that particular program had doubled this year, and in response to a passing comment, these fire department personnel organized quickly and provided vegetable sides for Thanksgiving meal for more than 65 area families. While this sort of generosity is accomplished more than we realize, and oftentimes without mention or recognition, several individuals had brought the story to me in the last several weeks and thought this act of generosity warranted particular mention. It is indicative, I think, of the manner in which all of our city employees, or many of our city employees, in this case the fire department employees, demonstrate their compassion for the residents in the community and surrounding area by going above and beyond the course and obligation of their professional duties. I think we have an exceptional employee group, and in this particular case, these firefighters have demonstrated the highest commitment to public service. And these and all acts of kindness and generosity are worthy of gratitude and recognition. And I just wanted to let you know about this. It's a fitting conclusion to the Thanksgiving holiday, and perhaps an appropriate way to orient ourselves to the coming Christmas holiday and the needs of others. Speaking of Christmas holidays, the Christmas parade is this Saturday at 6 o'clock. And just as a general polite reminder or piece of information, the parade will go in reverse this year. So if you were a regular attendee and you have your favorite spot picked out, it's not going to be exactly the way it was in previous years, and that's due in part to the bridge project and also a recognition of the ability to conclude and disperse parade participants more efficiently and effectively. So change can be difficult for humans. We hope you still decide to attend the parade and enjoy yourselves. That's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Hamp. Item 8 is citizens' comment period.
Mr. Lanham is on the list, but I think he
He's
may
came
have
and gone.
departed, and we heard from him. So no other individuals have signed up to speak.
Is there a motion to adjourn then?
So moved.
We are adjourned.